Now let's move over the style for ThingList and Thing from the static version. Here's our static version. All right, here we see a class of things. Pretty good guess that that applies to our list. So let's copy that rule and put it in ThingList.css. Now we named the class something different, didn't we? We named it after our component. Class name, capital T, capital L, ThingList. So let's rename it in our selector. .ThingList. Save that. And now we have this white box with rounded corners and a shadow. Step in the right direction. Our individual things could use a little style, though. Looking back at the static version, all right, I see the next thing is thing. Then we have thing last child. So this is an input checked and a sibling with a details thing. Let's look at our static HTML and see what that looks like. Okay, so it looks like each LI class thing has a checkbox in it and a div with a class of details. All right, so all of those are going to be part of it. Thing is going to have an element with a class of name inside it. This actions class, let's see, is that inside there? Here's span class actions. That is inside the thing. So we'll keep that rule. Thing hover, actions button, button, add thing in button GitHub. Those are not part of the thing. But everything above there. So everything above button, add thing, and button.github all the way up to .thing here. So since it's kind of a pain to select exactly the right thing, I'm going to go ahead and paste that into Slack. And that stuff is what I'm going to put inside thing.css, which is already being imported, I think. Thing CSS, yep. But the class here is lowercase thing. Inside our component, it is uppercase thing. So let's do a find and replace. Let's find .thing. Let's replace it with .capital thing. Now, we need this to be a case-sensitive find and replace. So if you'll notice, these three little options here in the search box. See, match case is the first one. So select that, and it outlines it. Then let's replace all by clicking this little button here. And it's done. If we save that, now we at least see the borders show up. That's not much to look at. Why doesn't it look prettier? Well, looking back at the static version, there was a whole lot of structure inside each thing, wasn't there? Here's a thing. So it's got an input, it's got a div, and then a div within the div, and a span, and a button inside the span. So I'm just going to copy one of these. Everything that's inside the LI. So the input, the div, all of that. And over here in thing.js, inside of my LI, I'm going to keep thing.name there so I don't lose track of it. But inside of my LI, then I'm going to paste all of that business. I'm going to outdent as appropriate with command left bracket. So it looks like this, inside this div with the class of name, is where my actual thing name goes. So I'm going to take thing name and put it there inside this div. If I save that, looks like I have a little problem. What's my problem? It says unterminated JSX contents. So it sounds like we're missing a closing tag. Why? Because input is an empty element. And this is not HTML. This is really XML. So we do have to self-close empty elements with a / right before the closing angle bracket. Now they're there. They're still a little ugly. This button looks awful. What gives? All our CSS rules are there. I can see that these things have classes. Aha! They have classes, not class names, right? Can't use class. So everywhere I see class, I'm going to make that class name. Do that, make the change. Now these things are heartbreakingly gorgeous. Where's my remove button? Watch this. Watch what, you say? Yes, it's because we're not quite there yet. Why? We're using Font Awesome here. We haven't brought Font Awesome into this project. So let's do that. In our static CSS, at the top, right underneath our Google fonts, we import Font Awesome. And instead of installing Font Awesome locally and putting it in our NPM or node modules somewhere, I'm just going to import inside our CSS from a CDN. I'm going to go ahead and paste this import line in here for you in Slack. So where should we put this? Let's put it inside ThingCSS, since at least so far, that's the only place we're using Font Awesome. So I'm just going to make that the first line here. Refresh, or save. Now we get the trash can icon when we hover over a thing. Hover over a thing. Neat. And it turns red when we hover over that. So why does it hide and show up like that? Let's look at these styles. Notice this. Actions, that's the span that the remove button is inside. I have opacity 0. In other words, it's transparent, completely transparent. But now we have the action span when it's a descendant of something with a class of thing and a pseudo class of hover. In other words, when we're hovering over it, the opacity is 1. So when we hover over the thing, we don't have to hover right over the actions. We just hover over the thing that shows up. Now, mind you, this is kind of poor for accessibility. For example, on a mobile device, you can't hover. So these things are never going to show up. So you're probably going to want to add some sort of rule at some point that makes these things visible on mobile devices by default. But it's kind of a neat effect while we're in the browser. So we're leaving it for now. It's a neat trick. And it turns red when we hover directly over it, because down here at the very bottom, a button with a class of remove that we're hovering over gets this nice deep red. Beautiful. Now we've got content editable equal true on this thing. Let's refresh the page. I already cleared this warning out earlier, but now let's actually take a look at it. Unknown DOM property content editable. Did you mean content editable camel cased? In HTML, we generally put the attribute as all lowercase. But in the actual DOM, it's content editable camel case, and JSX gets rid of all those inconsistencies anyway. So it is camel cased content editable. So let's change that. Remember, this is JavaScript, not really HTML. Save it. Now it's still complaining. We've got a different complaint. A component is content editable and contains children managed by React. In other words, this text node here comes from a prop, so it's managed by React. It is now your responsibility to guarantee that none of those nodes are unexpectedly modified or duplicated. This is probably not intentional. Don't try to tell me my intentions, React. But this is a hint that content editable is going to be a little more complicated in React. So for right now, sure, I can make these editable. If I start typing in there, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just going to take content editable out of that. And when it comes time to actually make these editable, we'll deal with it then. All right, now I'm happy that we've made this thing look right. What happens if you check one of these? Whoa, it crosses it right out, right? Magic? Nope. We do it with pure CSS. Look at this. An input with the pseudo class checked. In other words, a checked checkbox. An adjacent sibling of that with a class of details. Text decoration, line through. Neat. That's how we did it. So, make things so pretty.